Hello, everyone. Hi, friends. Welcome to today's discussion. Today, I have a wonderful topic for you. And in the question and the topic that we're going to be talking about today is, should you switch from VAWA to a marriage green card after falling in love? Okay, my name is Attorney Ebony Anufaro. I'm an immigration attorney in Jersey City, and I represent clients in all 50 states and around the world regarding U.S. immigration. Let's talk about something very real, right? And let's talk honestly, right? And let's talk about the emotional aspect of this topic, right? So you filed a VAWA case, you went through something very difficult, maybe even traumatic, and now you've met someone new, right? You've fallen in love again. And then the question becomes, right? Should I stay, in my VAWA case, or should I switch to a marriage green card with my new partner? And it's a really good question. I get this question a lot, but I want you to listen very carefully because this is not just a romantic decision. This is a legal strategy decision that can impact your entire immigration future. And today, I'm going to break down, for you in detail, the risks, the opportunities, the immigration climate, right? And what you absolutely need to think about before making this this move, okay? So I want to start by saying number one, your immigration history never goes away. All right? So that's one thing I need you to understand right away. Your immigration history does not reset. Every petition that you file, every statement that you make, every timeline you present, it all stays in your file. Even though VAWA cases are confidential and protected by law, USCIS still sees that history, the historical pattern, that background, they still see all of that internally. So if you switch from VAWA to a marriage-based green card, USCIS can ask you, why did you file for VAWA? Right? What happened in the prior relationship? How does that timeline connect to this new relationship? And if your story is not consistent, if it's not clear and credible, you can create serious problems for yourself, right? So these are things that you really want to be strategic about. So what VAWA really is, right, is, you know, it's an opportunity for you, right, to have freedom, right? It's a self petition without your abuser. You get to stay independent in your immigration process. You get to potentially avoid certain bars to adjustment of status. You get to obtain authorization and protection while your case is pending, right? VAWA is very powerful, right? Because unlike a marriage green card case, you are not dependent on anyone else when it comes to your VAWA case, right? And in today's climate, right, we have to be honest, independence is a big deal, right? It's a really big deal. But I want to talk more about the reality of the current immigration climate and, because that's going to really matter more than ever when it comes to decisions regarding your immigration case. Like we are in a heightened scrutiny environment. That's just a reality, right? Immigration still works. People are still getting approved. We're getting approvals, all the time. But we have to be honest with ourselves and understand that we are living in a heightened scrutiny environment today when it comes to U.S. immigration. So you have to understand that USCIS is applying more rigorous review to VAWA cases. And I discussed this in a previous video talking about some of the new changes that began in 2025 and are continuing to happen in 2026, right? Officers have more discretion now with these types of cases. Inconsistencies are being examined very closely. There's a stronger focus on fraud detection because they believe that there are a lot of people, unfortunately, taking advantage of this immigration benefit and filing fictitious VAWA cases. So there's a stronger focus on fraud when it comes to VAWA. At the same time, marriage-based cases are also being scrutinized heavily as well. We've seen that interviews are becoming more intense. Everyone is being called in for an interview. The previous administration, they did offer interview waivers for marriage cases. We had several clients who were blessed enough to have an interview waiver and they got approved without one, during that time. But we're seeing that every marriage case is being called into for interviews, timeline inconsistencies, also you know, raise red flags quickly at the same time. So they're looking at everything, right? So switching paths, doesn't mean that you are going to avoid scrutiny, right? Because on both sides, they're scrutinizing the cases, right? So, switching paths could actually possibly increase scrutiny, right? We don't know. But it is something to consider, okay? There are some good things about marriage cases. I don't want to say that, because they're scrutinizing marriage cases, that it's not a good idea, right? Because we're seeing cases getting approved very quickly, some cases within 2 to 4 months for marriage cases, right? So there are still positive things happening even in this current climate. Okay. So the question is, back to the, beginning, can you switch from a VAWA to a marriage case? And the answer is yes, yes, you can, right? You can switch, right? You can withdraw your VAWA case, right? You can file a new marriage petition. But the real question is, just because you can doesn't mean that you should. Because every case is different. This is where your strategy is going to be very important. Just because you can doesn't mean that you should. And if you are in a situation where you have a pending case, please, please, before you make that decision, talk to an immigration attorney. Please do that, okay? So I want to break down strategically some of the pros and the cons of this particular situation if you are in this situation. So now, what are some of the pros of staying in your VAWA case? Independence. Talked about that earlier. You control your own case completely. Your abuser is not involved. You control the evidence that's submitted. You will be the one interviewed. You control everything regarding your case from start to finish. It's confidential. You don't even need your abuser's financial support, right? That's not required for VAWA. You have true independence when it comes to your VAWA case. That's a positive. That's a good thing, right? You also have protection from your past, right? So your abuser's not involved at all, and that's good, right? So you don't have to worry about potential sabotage, because a lot of times I do have people contact me and they say that they're worried that their abuser is going to sabotage their case. Well, in the VAWA case, it's confidential and they're not even a part of the process, right? VAWA also offers some waivers and flexibility. So, with VAWA applicants, you may be exempt from some immigration bars, right? That you don't have that opportunity with a marriage-based green card. And that's always a plus, right? Especially if you have a complicated immigration history, maybe you entered without inspection, the VAWA case might offer you some of those exemptions, right? Again, less reliance on proving a new relationship, right? So you're not being judged on a new marriage. You're being judged on making sure that your previous marriage was obviously real and genuine, and proving that you're a good person, proving that there was abuse in the marriage, you lived with your abuser, and so forth, right? And it also offers you safer legal position, right? Especially, like I said before, if your history is complicated, with VAWA, you're going to have that safety in the legal position, because VAWA does offer some protections when it comes to abuse victims. Basically, this is why VAWA exists, right? It's to protect you and it's also to give you control. And they created this legislation because they wanted to give victims an opportunity to have access to immigration benefits without relying on their abuser. That was the intention behind this immigration legislation and benefit, okay? Now, those are really good things, all positives, but there are some cons, a few of them, to staying in the VAWA. I want to be honest about that. And this is something that a lot of people grapple with. And this is why I get the question a lot as to why they, should I switch? Should I leave? And start a new case and so forth. Because the truth is, VAWA takes a long time, long processing times. We've seen the increase. I remember when VAWA was taking a year, 18 months, and my clients were like, oh my God, it's taking forever. Why is it taking so long? Well, now we're seeing that VAWA cases on average are taking about 4 years, right? In total, maybe even longer to process. And the processing times are only getting longer. I hope that things change. I hope that we see a decrease in processing times, but that is just the reality of where we are at the time that I am recording this video and this discussion. We have long processing times for VAWA, and some people that is just really hard to grapple with, right? Another con is the emotional burden of a VAWA case, right? Being tied to your past traumatic story and experience, right? And having to still sit in that while you wait undocumented, right? While you wait in limbo. And that's hard for a lot of people. And I totally understand and I get it. For some people, they want to just be able to move on and start afresh, and move past what they went through. So that is really hard. The emotional burden of that takes a toll. I totally get it. Some other cons is the heavy documentation that's required with VAWA. Again, you have to prove the abuse. And sometimes in some situations, it's hard to prove that, especially if there was no physical abuse and it was more psychological or emotional, right? And there was extreme cruelty and trying to prove that evidence, right, might be hard, or also proving the relationship, right, was real, right, and genuine. A lot of times clients who are in abusive situations are kicked out. They're removed from that situation, so they don't necessarily have all the evidence that they would have had if the relationship was still going well, because they've been removed from that. And with VAWA, credibility is very important. So that's really hard. That heavy documentation, is also a con when it comes to VAWA. And if you're working with a good VAWA immigration attorney, the attorney will guide you on how to present credible evidence and you should be fine. But it's still a lot of work, right, when it comes to that documentation. And then unfortunately, right, in today's climate, there's increased scrutiny. Officers are looking closely at consistency. They are looking at your evidence. They're looking at non-physical evidence, right, to see if it rises to the level of extreme cruelty, right? So things have changed. These are some of the cons that we're seeing, and yes, VAWA is powerful, right? But you have to remember that it's not always going to be fast nor easy. All right. So that is something to keep in mind. Now, we're going to also talk about what are some of the pros to switching to a marriage green card case, right? I want to talk about that because people will move on. It's part of life. They will fall in love. They will meet someone who wants to probably get married and be with you, right? And maybe they told you, like, I'll help you because I love you. I want to make sure that you have your documentation and I can help you do it, right? You've probably heard those things, right? So I want to talk about possibly what are the positives to making that switch, the pros to switching, right? One of the pros is that it could be potentially a faster path, especially if you're married to a US citizen. We can see that this case might move faster. It's definitely going to be faster than your typical VAWA case. And even in today's climate, as we see that things are heavily scrutinized, we are seeing a pattern where marriage cases are moving extremely quickly. Like I mentioned earlier, we have cases going as quick as 2 months, 4 months, 6 months to approval, which is really fast when you compare to that of a VAWA case, right? Also, one of the pros about switching is that you are emotionally looking forward, right? You're building a future. You're not reliving your past. You're able to move past the trauma of the abuse, right? And a lot of people want to be able to do that. And I get that. I really do, right? Another pro is that, stronger case, you'll have a stronger case, I should say, if your relationship is really solid. So if you're coming in and you have a really solid marriage case, it's genuine, you do have a strong approval potential with a strong, solid marriage case with strong evidence, right? That's a pro. I still want you to think about these are some of the pros, whether you should do it or not is going to be a discussion in itself, right? And then, when you're filing, you're not relying on trauma-based evidence. You're relying on your love story. You're relying on moving forward in the future with the person you're in love with, right? So for some people, right? Some people, and you're going to make this decision with your attorney, this could be the right move for some people, not everybody. Okay. I also want to talk about the cons of switching. All right. And this is where people are going to get in trouble. Right. So I really want you to pay attention to this because it's very important. Right. So, number one, the heightened scrutiny. I'm going to emphasize in scrutiny, right? Prior VAWA filings makes your case more sensitive, regardless of how strong your case is. So if you come in and you have a wife who is pregnant, or you have kids, or you guys are living together, you have all this evidence, right? Because you had the prior VAWA filing, your case is still going to be considered more sensitive, right? Because that, like I mentioned in the beginning, that immigration history does not go away. It doesn't. Okay. There's going to be credibility questions because you had a prior VAWA case, right? So USCIS wants to make sure that you're credible, right? And I just want to talk about this, that it's not just with VAWA cases. If you filed a previous marriage petition case, right, and now you're on your second marriage petition case because that case didn't work out, they can still look back at the first marriage. They will look back. They want to know that that first petition was bona fide, right? That immigration history does not reset. It does not go away. Okay. USCIS can ask you, was the first marriage real? Were you in a real marriage the first time? Was the abuse claim truthful? Right? If you switch now to a marriage claim, they can ask these questions, right? Well, how quickly did you move on? These are questions that they can ask. Timeline issues, right? Overlapping relationships. That can be a red flag. Well, when did you start your relationship with the new spouse, right? Was it during the previous marriage? These are things that can come up when you're switching your case, right? Another con to switching, right? And this is not the USCIS side, this is more so you filing with your new spouse, is the dependency on your new spouse. Remember, VAWA cases are independent cases. You are in control of your own petition. Now, if you switch to a marriage-based green card case, you're back to be depending on that spouse, depending on that spouse being your sponsor, depending on that spouse providing the financial evidence that they can support you, right? And what happens is that relationship fails, right? Your case collapse. Your case collapse because guess what? Your marriage case is dependent on your spouse who's sponsoring you. And I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but once you remarry, right? You can be engaged, you can date, but once you remarry and you have a pending VAWA case, your case becomes void because that case is based on your marriage to a US citizen, right? That was an abuser. Or if you're divorced, as long as the divorce was less than 2 years at the time that you filed, right? But once you remarry, you no longer can qualify. Okay. So also another con is possible exposure to enforcement risks because in certain cases you have to keep this in mind is that in certain cases a denial can actually trigger consequences, right? Like being placed in removal proceedings. This happens for some cases that are asylum cases that are filed. A denial can lead to potentially being placed in removal proceeding, right? So this is not just a simple switch, right? This is a strategic repositioning of your entire case. When it comes to US immigration, it is all about your legal strategy. Okay, it's not just paperwork, it is legal strategy. Now, so some key questions that you must ask before deciding is, you know, is my new relationship strong and well documented, right? Does my timeline make logical sense? Will my story remain consistent across both cases? Do I have immigration violations that VAWA protects me from? What happens if, the new relationship doesn't work out? What happens if this new relationship takes a turn for the left and now I'm dependent on my spouse, right? Am I emotionally ready, right? And am I also legally prepared? These are questions that I want you to think about. Okay, I'm going to repeat them. Is my new relationship strong and well documented? Does my timeline make logical sense? Will my story remain consistent across both cases? Because remember, your history doesn't reset. Do I have immigration violations that I'm protected under VAWA that won't be protected under a marriage green card case, right? Like, for example, entering without inspection. What happens if my relationship doesn't work out? And also, am I emotionally ready and legally prepared? Because the truth is, love is not enough in immigration law. It's beautiful. Love is a beautiful thing, but it's not enough. Okay. So I want you to think and remember that it's always going to be strategy over emotion. Strategy over emotion. And this is where people make mistakes, right? They lead with emotion instead of leading with a strategy. And immigration law does not care about how you feel. They don't. I'm just giving it to you really straight. I'm being very honest. I'm trying to level set. Immigration law does not care about how you feel. It cares about your evidence, your consistency. It cares about your credibility, right? It cares about your legal eligibility, right? That's why strategy matters when it comes to US immigration. Okay. Now, why do you need a legal strategy session? Why? Let's just be very clear with each other. Let's be clear. This is not something that you need to figure out on your own. One wrong move can delay your case for years. One wrong move can lead to a denial. It can put you in removal proceedings in worst case scenarios, right? And in today's immigration climate, mistakes are not easily forgiven. They're not. That's why I always offer a legal strategy session. I've even changed my consultations and I'm emphasizing that they're not just consultations anymore, they're legal strategy sessions. And in these sessions, we analyze your full immigration history, right? We compare both your options. Like in a situation like this, we're going to compare both your options, VAWA versus marriage. We're going to identify the risks specific to you. Strategy sessions are case specific, right? And then we're going to create a customized legal strategy because your case is not like everyone else's case. Your case is not like your neighbor's case or your cousin's case. Oh, my cousin did it this way. We both came from the same country. We both have VAWA. Nope, not every VAWA is the same. I don't care what they tell you. I don't care what your friend told you. Like, oh, I got mine in 6 months. Oh, my lawyer did this. Yes, your lawyer probably did that, but your facts are different from the next person's facts. Your facts are different. Everybody's case is specific, which is why having a strategy session has to be specifically tailored to your case. Okay. So if you're, in this situation, I implore you, do not guess. Do not rely on TikTok advice. And there's a lot of advice on TikTok. I'm on TikTok. Don't rely on TikTok advice. That's general information. Even attorneys on there will tell you this is for immigration educational purposes only. Talk to an immigration attorney. Do not rely on what your friend told you. Oh, this is how it worked for me. No. Invest in a strategy. All right? Because immigration is one of those few areas where the wrong decision today can cost you years of your life. So click the link below. I have a link to where you can schedule a strategy session with me if you like. Let's make the right decision before you make a move that you can't undo. Okay, my name again is Attorney Ebony Anuforo. I am a U.S. immigration attorney. I represent clients in all 50 states. We conduct our strategy sessions via Zoom video. We try to be as convenient for our clients as possible. We can do phone, Google Meet, Zoom, and we do offer for those who are local in-person interviews as well. Okay, so if you want to schedule that strategy session with me, go ahead and book a call. Okay, just remember your future deserves more than hope. Okay, it deserves a strategy. Thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to talking to you in the next discussion. Take care.